We're going to be continuing Tafseer Surah Taha. And last time we stopped at the part قال آمنتم له قبل أن آذن لكم إنه لكبيركم الذي علمكم السحر فلأقطعن أيديكم وأرجلكم من خلاف ولأصلبنكم في جذوع النخل ولتعلمن أينا أشد عذابا وأبقى. And this is the part when Fir'aun himself, just when they saw, that is all the magicians, when they saw the snake gulping up all that magic that they had done, that is when فَأُلْقِيَ السَّحَرَةُ سُجَّدًا. That's when all the magicians instantly فَأُلْقِيَ. And when we see fa, that would actually mean it was an instant move. فَأُلْقِيَ السَّحَرَةُ سُجَّدًا. Instantly, the magicians fell in prostration. قالوا آمنا برب هارون وموسى. And they said, we believe in the Lord of Harun and Musa. And scholars had different opinions on why they said برب هارون وموسى and not برب موسى وهارون. Well, here are a number of things. Number one is that برب هارون وموسى, in the ayah that we see here is not necessarily telling us that that is the instant part, that the instant wording right away, because in another surah, in Surah Al-A'raf, it actually said قالوا آمنا برب العالمين رب موسى وهارون, that we believed in the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of Musa and Harun, versus here it said Rabbi Haruna wa Musa. So the differences of opinions happened because the letter waw itself, which is right here, برب هارون وموسى, برب هارون وموسى, is not necessarily that one is better than the other. It's not that one is better than the other, but because the waw just simply means mutlaq al-jam', meaning that it's combining both of them. There's not necessarily one better than the other. So بِرَبِّ هَارُونَ وَمُوسَى, the Lord of Harun and Musa, not to mean that one of them is better than the other. So the other part is بِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, بِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, the Lord of the worlds, which is as in Surah Al-A'raf. And then the explanation, Rabbi Haruna wa Musa, in this incident, they basically refer to Harun because they heard him speaking first, and because Harun is older than Prophet Musa. So they said, Rabbi Haruna wa Musa. They didn't necessarily know any detail about who the Lord that Prophet Musa alayhi salam was inviting them to believe in. So they just referred it as the Lord of Harun and Musa. They didn't know much about the Lord of Prophet Musa and Harun. قَالَ آمَنْتُمْ لَهُ قَبْلَ أَنْ آذَنَ لَكُمْ. Then he said, that is the Pharaoh, آمنتم له قبل أن آذن لكم. Did you believe in him before I had even given you the permission to do so? آمنتم له قبل أن آذن لكم إنه لكبيركم الذي علمكم السحر. Now آمنتم له here is also a sign that the reason why they believed was really because it was through Musa alayhi salam. And so when we say amantum lahu, would mean that you believed in what he came with. You believed in what he he was telling you in terms of truth. So in this situation, when a person does the da'wah that you do is actually in the da'wah that you do is actually in place of or speaking on behalf of Islam. So you're speaking on behalf of Islam or speaking on behalf of the prophets and messengers. So in this situation, when somebody says, I believe in you, it doesn't necessarily mean to believe in that person to being the person that is the creator or anything like that. But here to believe in Prophet Musa alayhi salam, or to submit to him, was really to mean that they believed in what he had come with. All right, so amantum lahu, meaning that they would believe in what he had come with, all the da'wah, all the things that he had come with, and that's what they were speaking of, which is amantum lahu qabla an adhana lakum, before I even give you the permission to do so. إنه لكبيركم الذي علمكم السحر. He's the top leaders. He's the one that taught you all that you are doing. فلا أقطعن أيديكم. I'm just going to فلا أقطعن. أقطعن is like deeply butcher. I will be deeply butchering your arms, amputating your arms and your legs. Min khilaf. Min khilaf meaning the right arm versus the left leg, and the left leg versus the right arm, and so forth. وَلَا أُصَلِّبَنَّكُمْ فِي جُذُوعِ النَّخْلِ, and I will crucify you في جذوع النخل. And we talked about this last time. في جذوع النخل. This is not necessarily saying في جذوع النخل. This is not saying في جذوع النخل to mean that it is on, but it is so deeply, they are so deeply crucified in there. They are so deeply crucified in there to the point that they had become as if they were part of it. Now that is to help us see, when we're talking about how they are becoming part of it, that they were so hardly crucified against the palm trees, that as if they had become part of it. وَلَتَعْلَمُنَّ أَيُّنَا أَشَدُّ عَذَابًا وَأَبْقَى. So now the Pharaoh himself, even after all this torture that he was doing against them, he said, and وَلَا تَعْلَمُنَّ, again the threat, again that threat, and again that threat on what he will be doing in the future. Still he left it not necessarily defined, in order to bring about more terror and to bring about more fear. وَلَتَعْلَمُنَّ أَيُّنَا أَشَدُّ عَذَابًا وَأَبْقَى. Who is more fearful in adhab, in torture, and ever and or lasting. And here, قالوا لن نؤثرك, the response that they gave. Now look at the response. Okay, hold on. What are you doing? قالوا لن نؤثرك. So now their response. They responded to all this torture. They responded to all this threat that he was threatening in. قالوا لن نؤثرك. They said, we're not going to. The word نؤثرك, look at the word نؤثرك here. نؤثرك, when you do ithar, it is basically when you prefer something over another. So here, لن نؤثرك, they are saying, we're not going to let you get the preferable thing, meaning we're not going to have you take what is preferred. على ما جاءنا من البينات. We're not even, no matter what position you have, what position you hold, we're not going to allow you to take that preferred position and take what Prophet Musa alayhi salam had come with all the evidences. وَالَّذِي فَطَرَنَا. وَالَّذِي فَطَرَنَا to mean, and even وَالَّذِي فَطَرَنَا, and meaning that two things he had come with. One, he came with evidences, and two, that he came to them with the belief and to connect themselves with the one that created their own instincts, their own purity, their own inclinations. So they said, you know what, the one that created those fitra, the pure instinct in us, is the same one that is behind all those evidences that Prophet Musa alayhi salam came with. فَقْضِ مَا أَنْتَ قَاضٍ. Meaning what? Meaning they're actually taking a moment here to tell him that, you know what? It has gone beyond. Our faith has gone beyond our mind in seeing those signs and those evidences that Prophet Musa alayhi salam was a true prophet of Allah, because we could actually be touched with it. We were so touched that it even touched our own fitrah. It even touched it, totally matched it, totally fit what the instinct we have on the inside. And there's no way that you can exacerbate it or even detach it away from us, because it is part of it. It is so connected. It is so connected that you cannot at all take it away from us. And from here, we could see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that the deeper it goes into the fitrah, the iman, the deeper it goes beyond just the mind evidences, and it goes deep into the fitrah. That's when the iman had fully, let's say, what is the word, but that has been absorbed by the person, and it fully completed its place in the heart. فَقْضِ مَا أَنْتَ قَاضٍ. Now, our iman is so engraved in our own fitrah that, you know what, فَقْضِ, rule all that you want. Put all those rules and put all those trials, set up all those punishments. إنما تقضي هذه الحياة الدنيا. The rule, the orders that you give, all those different tortures that you can put up, إنما تقضي هذه الحياة الدنيا. The rule that you give is just in this life, is just in this dunya. In other words, they didn't even care about it. It didn't even at all to scare them away, because it was so engraved in their fitrah. It was so engraved deep inside that they knew that this life was just plain surface, the tip of the iceberg to what this life stands for. Inna amanna bi rabbina. Now they explain how they believed and how the iman came. In the beginning, they saw those bayinat, they saw those evidences, but then it went down into their fitrah. So they explained what happened. Inna amanna bi rabbina. We believed, amanna. We believed in the Lord Almighty. Why? لِيَغْفِرَ لَنَا, so that He will forgive us. خطايانا, a plural of خطيئة. خطايانا means our sins, all those transgressions that we had been doing. وَمَا أَكْرَهْتَنَا عَلَيْهِ مِنَ السِّحْرِ. And the moment that force that you put in, you coerced us to actually face Prophet Musa alayhi salam with this magic. But that's because we were forced to do this. We did not want to actually do it. But you made us right there stand in front of Musa alayhi salam. Wallahu khayru wa abqa. All we could tell you is God Almighty, if you can torture. So here, إِنَّمَا تَقْضِي هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. You can torture all that you want. You can torture all that you want. And you can do anything in this dunya. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala khayrun wa abqa. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually the one khayr. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would order in evil, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala In contrast to what you order for, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders for good. And in contrast to what you order for, which is تقضي هذه الحياة الدنيا, it's one, your order, Pharaoh, is limited in this dunya, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's order is everlasting. Your order is evil, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's order is good. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's order is good. Now that's why they said here, in contrast to your order, the Pharaoh, his order is evil and limited, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's order is only fair, just, and everlasting. Now compare the two. إِنَّهُ مَن يَأْتِ رَبَّهُ مُجْرِمًا. Whoever comes to their Lord, مُجْرِمًا. Whoever comes to their Lord in a state of crime. Why crime? Because according to Islam, that once you transgress the limit of your Lord Almighty, it is considered as a crime. It is considered as transgressing the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually said, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ أَجْرَمُوا كَانُوا مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يَضْحَكُونَ. He said that those that had transgressed the limits or were criminals, كَانُوا مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يَضْحَكُونَ. They were مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يَضْحَكُونَ. They were mocking, they were laughing at those that were believers. Now, when we look at al-ijram right here, the ijram, the crime that they did is really to go against two things. The ijram that they did in order to go against two things, the number one thing, sorry, let me just do one thing. The ijram that they did was to go against one, the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rule that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had set. And that's here. So they went against the faith and they went against the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why we see in the Quran that whoever goes against the faith is considered considered a crime. And somebody that goes against the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that too is considered transgressing the limits and crime against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِنَّ لَهُ جَهَنَّمْ. Then فَإِنَّ. Now I want you to look at the word fa and inna. The word fa meaning that instantly, meaning that this would be the reason for it. So here, the reason for going into Jahannam is because of al-ijram, of the two things, is really because of the crime. Going against the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or going against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's faith. فَإِنَّ, this fa would mean that that's the reason for it. لَهُ جَهَنَّمْ. Then they will be dwelling in Jahannam. لَا يَمُوتُ فِيهَا وَلَا يَحْيَا. Wait a minute. They're not dying in it and they're not alive in it. So what are they? Are they alive or dead in Jahannam? Or what really happens? So we could see that this ayah was actually saying لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا. لا يموت, meaning that they will not die, because once you are dead, then you don't feel pain anymore. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in another ayah actually explained that they are not dead. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring death in a form of a ram on Judgment Day, Kabshun amlah, meaning that it's a white big ram on Judgment Day, and would ask all the people in Jannah, do you remember this? Do you know who he is? And then they will recognize it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, well, this is death, and slaughters death. Wait a minute, how is it that death is slaughtered? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم. The one that created life and خلق الموت والحياة, created death and created life. And that makes death a creature. Well, since death is a creature, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that this death creature is also just like he, as this death is a creature, that on Judgment Day there is no death coming as a result of all the torture that they'll be facing in Jahannam. And which is why لا يموت, there would be no death in it, and they will still be feeling the pain. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be replacing the skin in order for them to feel more and more of that pain. وَلَا يَحْيَا, وَلَا يَحْيَا. So are they dead or alive? If they're not even alive, well, the true life you will be feeling is when there's actually real life, when you are feeling some good things about it. So here, wala yahya, meaning, and they don't even feel that life because all they're surrounded with is actually torture. So in that situation, you could see that the life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about that there's no actual death and there is no feeling and sense of life, but all they feel is just a torture and a hope to die. وَمَن يَأْتِهِ مُؤْمِنًا. نسأل الله العفو والعافية. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep all this away from us. وَمَن يَأْتِهِ مُؤْمِنًا. And whoever comes to the Lord Almighty, يَأْتِهِ, meaning whoever comes to the Lord Almighty, مُؤْمِنًا. مُؤْمِنًا, meaning that Iman had filled them. مُؤْمِنًا, it came in as an indefinite word. قَدْ عَمِلَ الصَّالِحَاتِ, meaning, what is mu'mina? So they are mu'mineen in faith, but not only mu'mineen in faith, قَدْ عَمِلَ الصَّالِحَاتِ, but their iman led them to actually do pious action. And you want to remember here, the word amila, meaning to put into action. So there's an action. And amila could also mean it became like a behavior that is who they are. Amila salihat. So this salihat would here come to us with a salihat, that that definite, defining article, amila salihat, that they would actually do the pious action. But here's the thing, is that this al is telling us two things. Number one is that it is defined. Who defines the pious action? Who defines piety? Who defines what is a right thing to do and what isn't? Well, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says as-salihat, it is defined. So when we look at salihat defined, it's not necessarily that, oh, I felt that this was right, I felt that something was telling me to do this, but there's actually a defined action, and where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would define it as good or bad. Amila salihat, meaning it's defined, and also that they would only do amila salihat. So what is defined? Two things are defined: that their action is pious, and they do what is defined as piety. Sorry. فَأُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الدَّرَجَاتُ الْعُلَى. Then فَأُولَٰئِكَ, just as this فَإِنَّ, this fa. So here, the reason why they are mujrimeen, the reason why they are criminals, then, well, the reason why they will be getting Jahannam is because they're criminals. Here, the reason why they are getting those lahum fa'ulaika, then those would be getting ad-darajat al-ula. Ad-darajat means the steps, the levels. Al-ula, the highest levels, is simply the same thing. So you've got here, this is saying, well, what causes and what eventually becomes the main reason why somebody will be getting into that level is really because of this action. Same thing. The reason why these people are getting Jahannam, wal-iyadhu billah, is simply because they have been transgressing the limits. That's the same thing. Anywhere when we speak of the cause and effect, somebody might ask the question, well, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, somebody that might be a believer and also do what is good? Can they still go to hellfire? Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you that He set a rule, and that rule is that if you do this, you will get this. So it's a cause and effect. And that's the same thing. You do this, the effect is going to be this. So the cause and effect came with it. And this is the letter Fa that's telling us it's an issue of cause and effect. The cause of going, what gets you to Jannah? Well, is really Iman and Amal Salih, is really faith and piety. فَأُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الدَّرَجَاتُ الْعُلَىٰ. Then those would be the groups that would have the highest levels. When you look at the highest level, they're in Jannah. It's not all the same level. And in Jannah, it's very much like a triangle. More people at the base of it. The higher you go up, the less people you will be finding, because not very many made it to the top. And not very many made it here. And very less made it here. And a lot less, not very less, but a lot less made it here. So that's why أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الدَّرَجَاتُ الْعُلَىٰ, that they would have the highest levels going up. And those are in Jannatu Adn. So when we look at that, and this is something to learn, you know, this graph right here, if you actually look at it, the more you find people doing what you're doing, the more you want to realize that you need to do other things that are different. Don't follow the trend, but the less you find people doing what you're doing, the more likely you are going to be finding yourself going higher. Don't follow what everybody else is doing. Don't look at how many people are doing such an action, but look at what others are not doing in order to go up. And those that are going up are the higher you go up, the less people you find. جنات عدن تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها. Jannatu Adn. The word Adn actually means pure, everlasting. Jannat are those different gardens, not one, but different gardens. In a hadith narrated in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, that people would be in their Jannah, and every Jannah is so distant, like the distance in light years between one star and another in space. And this is Jannatu Adn. تجري من تحتها الأنهار, that there will be flowing rivers that are going beneath these Jannat, beneath these gardens. خالدين فيها, that they will be living in it forever and ever. Why خالدين فيها? This is in order to suit this word. Why this word? Because here, Jahannam la yamutu fiha wa la yahya. There are two things for the people in hellfire. Some will stay forever, eternally, and some will actually leave at one point. All right? Yep, some will leave and some will stay. All right? Now, those that will leave eventually are really the sinners. So this relates to sin. They did their amount of punishment for the sin that they had committed, and those that will stay eternally are those that they were not sinners, but they were deniers totally. So here, khalidina fiha, eventually when they enter Jannah, they will be living in it forever and ever. They will be living in it forever and ever, and that is the eternal part. So how much is eternal? Eternal means unlimited time. وَذَلِكَ جَزَاءُ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. And that is going to be the jaza. That is going to be the reward. When we say jaza, it would mean reward. وَذَلِكَ So here's somebody commenting. When you said, do what few are doing, you remind me of the incident when Umar radiallahu anhu heard a Sahabi, Allahumma make me of the few. Can you share the story with us? All right, inshallah. ذَلِكَ جَزَاءُ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. That is the reward of those tazakka. Now, I want you to look at the word tazakka, because this is actually doing two things. So this is saying, well, there's yati mu'mina, yati mu'minan. So there's one level, is that they would have a high rank. But there's even a higher rank, which is Jannatu Adn. The high rank is that those that perform that tazkiyah. And here's the question. So what is tazkiyah in order to get there? Well, tazkiyah relates to a number of things. So tazkiyah, you're actually taking a moment. Let's do this. You're taking a moment to purify yourself. Purify yourself from what? So you have different inclinations. All right. Those inclinations that you have are really part of it is really related to your own existence. It is related to your own existence, but it can push you towards somewhere else. So towards your existence, just like animals. So let's do it here. So we've got tazkiyah, you've got things that relate to your own inclinations, just like animals. Eating, drinking, and reproduction. Okay, so all that reproduction, all that eating, drinking, just like animals. All right, now, there are the other parts which you would have in terms of mind. But your mind can act and is only acting as a tool to either do what your inclinations are asking you to do, or there's also the spiritual part of you. The spiritual part of you, that's when we talk about spirit, we're talking about either one side, which is ruh, which acts as that substance that's making you alive. And when we're talking about spirit, that's also the other part of a ruh, another side of it, which acts as that feeling, that closeness that you would feel to being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm just going to put here close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it doesn't at all mean that you unite with the Lord Almighty. This is absolutely haram. You don't unite. This is kufr, actually. All right, that unite with God Almighty is kufr. Nobody unites with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if you've got some deviated Sufis that said that this is al-ittihad wal-hulul, and al-ittihad, this type of al-ittihad where you unite with the Lord Almighty. That's kufr. This is not what we're talking about, which is what al-Hallaj said and what Rumi said we're talking about. No, is that you get that closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now with tazkiyah, your body can either focus on the physical part of those inclinations or can get the spiritual aspect. But here's the thing, is that our physical part is actually stronger in us than our spiritual part, because our physical part tends to be weaker in many ways. I know it's like stronger but weaker. Okay, I'll explain it. It is stronger because we tend to fear that we will end extinct. So because of that weakness, if we don't eat, we will get hungry, and then if we don't fill or the thirst, quench that thirst, we're going to end up getting the weakness, and the weakness is going to get us weaker and weaker and eventually die. But even if you don't pray, you won't die. All right? So that's why you won't feel the urge if you don't pray as how you would feel the urge to eat. The urge to eat, the urge to drink, the urge to reproduce, all these different urges, they're very strong in you. But that's because if you don't fulfill it, you will feel the weakness. You're able to identify it. But with spirituality is different. With spirituality, it's different, because you would assume, well, somebody can not have a religion and live 90, 100, and 100 and more years, and they're still alive. We don't feel the urge as powerful as the physical urge. So that's why we tend to ignore the spiritual urge. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about tazkiyah, that in order for us to feel the urge, the spiritual side of us, we have to reduce from the physical urge. What? Reduce from the physical urge? Yes, you reduce from the physical urge in order to empower the spiritual urge. And that's the tazkiyah part. So when we engage in tazkiyah, we engage in less eating, less drinking, and less or even limit the sexual desire to be between you and your husband or your wife. And when you eat and you drink, you limit it to halal, you limit the amount, you limit the food, you limit the eating, the drinking, etc. And all of that in order to give you the amount and rather than feed the urges. So you don't feed the urge, the physical urge, in order to focus and deprive the physical urge to a certain limit, of course, in order to feel that spiritual urge and actually enhance it. To empower one side, you have to reduce from the urge that you feel on the other side. And that is simply what tazkiyah means. Tazkiyah just means you take the amount, the decision, you take the effort, here's the word, you take the effort to detox those urges that will keep you holding on to the dunya, holding on to this life. You detox that urge and you control that urge, you mentor that urge. So when we look at tazkiyah, you put the effort to, one, detox by mentoring the urge, and you mentor it by limiting the amount to a stable amount, by limiting it to halal. You want to maintain it within halal, and you want to, when you say halal, meaning the amount as well, not only the type, but even the amount. And that's why when we're talking about obesity, the Prophet ﷺ actually considered that one of the first bid'ah that was ever going to be committed, the first innovation, is actually going to be obesity. Obesity acts as that measure, that scale that is helping you understand, are you feeding your physical urge or are you focusing on your spiritual urge? So when we look at the spiritual urge, we look at tazkiyah. We look at tazkiyah. How do I feed? We're not just focusing on obesity, but we're also looking at the different urges that our bodies might give us. The urge can be not only drinking and eating and sexual activity, but it can also be our own nafs wanting that hawa, wanting to probably get fame, wanting to probably expose itself, wanting to feed its own love of this dunya, wants money, wants attraction, all these different things which act as il-hawa. وَذَلِكَ جَزَاءُ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. So there's one level, the level of al-Iman and al-Amal al-Salih, and there's another level which is for the level of those that, yes, they had Iman and they were doing pious actions, but there's another level where they went beyond Iman and Amal Salih, and they even went for a level of tazkiyah, where they went for probably al-ihsan. وَلَقَدْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى. Now, you could see that the story here, وَلَقَدْ أَوْحَيْنَا. The laqad is that the word meaning it's it's telling you that the story didn't end. But the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam is telling you, well, there's so many different things, so many stories to say, but those stories, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't tell us all the details, but just said, وَلَقَدْ أَوْحَيْنَا. Just get the story, to make the story short. وَلَقَدْ أَوْحَيْنَا. And we have sent. sent those messages to Prophet Musa and Asri bi'ibadi, to go, and the word al-Isra, would mean to go during the night. So what happened? Well, Prophet Musa alayhi salam, when Fir'aun felt that he had lost the contest, contest between him and Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he felt that that was probably going to result in a revolution. So he decided to just let Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and also Bani Israel, to leave the country. All right, you want to go, go. But أن أسري بعبادي فاضرب لهم طريقا في البحر يبسا لا تخاف دركا ولا تخشى فأتبعهم فرعون. So in the beginning, the Pharaoh did actually give them the permission to leave. But then the Pharaoh had regret that permission and felt that he needed to bring them back, because that was going to probably mean the laborers going away, those slaves going away, and the country's civilization and the country's development was going to be at harm. The economy was going to be in danger. So that's why the Pharaoh actually followed them to bring them back. Let's comment on some of the words. أوحينا إلى موسى أن أسري بعبادي. So during the night, Prophet Musa alayhi salam was sent a wahi, go during the night, leave during the night, bi'ibadi. And this is really important. Notice that the word bi'ibadi, the word my servants. And this is a really important thing to comment on, because when you look at bi'ibadi, meaning that they went into a moment where they had become free from the enslavement of the Pharaoh, and freedom actually starts when you are free in one from worshiping other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to worshiping Allah. Then freedom later goes into another level where you are following the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're freeing. So here's another word again, that you're liberating yourself from following people to following the Lord of the people. It is so sad to see how people can easily fall in a manipulation and think that the more you take off from your clothes, that you're actually being free, when in reality you're manipulated, and that you are actually following a group of designers that told you that that was going to lead you into freedom, that was going to lead you into empowerment, and not realizing that the reality is that you are actually enslaved by those companies, by the fashion designers, by the people of al-hawa, by the people that are deciding what you should look like, and even what your face should look like, and every single part of your body, and how you act in public or act with the people around you. And without you realizing, you're actually enslaved. The worst of the worst of enslavement and slavery is when you don't even realize that you're being enslaved. When the reality of it is you're actually not free. And especially when you're told and you convince yourself that you're free, but still believe a major lie. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, An asri bi'ibadi, take my servants. This is a term of honor. This is a term of honor. The most honorable thing that you could discover a person is that they are servants of Allah, meaning that they are free from being servants to other people. And asri bi'ibadi, they're free from being servants to other people. So here, that once they had freed themselves from serving other people, now they are now free, and therefore take them. فَاضْرِبْ لَهُمْ. Then open up and go on, carry on. ضَرَبَ فِي الْأَرْضِ, meaning to take on a journey, take off in another English term. فَاضْرِبْ لَهُمْ طَرِيقًا فِي الْبَحْرِ يَبَسًا. Take off in a route, in a path. في البحر يبسا. في البحر يبسا. How is it that it's في البحر but it's يبسا? That in the sea. Now they were now going towards the Red Sea. في البحر يبسا. Now the sea is going to be a main obstacle. How are they going to pass when this huge sea is right in front of them? And by the way, I'll tell you guys, well, maybe I'll say it later. في البحر يبسا. This bahr is going to become a land. Yabas. Yabas meaning that it is going to be firm. لا تخاف دركا ولا تخشى. Where you will not fear. Darakan. What is darakan? Darakan meaning that he will not, where you won't fear that Fir'aun would reach you. So لا تخاف دركا, you would not fear that Fir'aun would ever reach you. ولا تخشى, and you would not be in full fear of any type of torture, or even that the Pharaoh would follow you. فأتبعهم فرعون بجنوده فغشيهم من اليم ما غشيهم. Now the Pharaoh regret letting them go. So the Pharaoh followed them with his own junud, with his own soldiers. فَغَشِيَهُمْ مِنَ الْيَمِّ مَا غَشِيَهُمْ. Therefore, فَغَشِيَهُمْ. غَشِيَ to mean to fully cover. The junud, the soldiers, and the Pharaoh were now fully covered from the waters and from the waves. From the waves that covered the Pharaoh. It fully covered the Pharaoh and also those soldiers, where they were once on the top of everything. Now they're on the lowest of everything. So the ayah says, مَا غَشِيَهُمْ. When you look at the word مَا غَشِيَهُمْ, meaning it is beyond description of how many waves and how far deep inside they went into that sea, and deep down into those waters, and they did not at all think that they were ever going to drown. وَأَضَلَّ فِرْعَوْنُ قَوْمَهُ وَمَا هَدَى. أَضَلَّ فِرْعَوْنُ. And the Pharaoh had deluded his people. أَضَلَّ فِرْعَوْنُ قَوْمَهُ وَمَا هَدَى. Now, two different things here. أَضَلَّ فِرْعَوْنُ. Isn't it enough to actually say that Fir'aun had deluded his people? So why go further and say وَمَا هَدَى? Well, there's a number of things here. Because when we say that Fir'aun had deluded his people, that would actually mean that there's only one path. If you are in a delusion, that means you're not on the right path. You can call it any ism you want. You can call it feminism. You can call it atheism. You can call it feminism. You can call it atheism, Buddhism. You can call it whatever you want. But one thing is, if you are on the hidayah, okay. If you are on the hidayah, if you are on guidance, that means you're not misguided. If you are misguided, that means you're not on the right path. So when we look at it here, we could see أَضَلَّ فِرْعَوْنَ has three different interpretations. أضل فرعون. The first interpretation is that this is simply what we call as عطف العام على الخاص, meaning that here, that this is one type of it, one type of meaning coming out of it. So أضل فرعون, that he himself had actually practiced the manipulation, أضل فرعون, and to explain it even more, وما هدى. To explain it even more, this is called the confirmation that if the person is on misguidance, that means that they are They are not guided. Simple. And there's another interpretation which actually is explained by Al-Kashaf. He actually said that because the ayah in another surah said, وَمَا أَهْدِكُمْ إِلَّا سَبِيلَ الرَّشَادِ, that Fir'aun in Surah Ghafir, he said, قَالَ فِرْعَوْنُ مَا أُرِيكُمْ إِلَّا مَا أَرَى وَمَا أَهْدِكُمْ إِلَّا سَبِيلَ الرَّشَادِ. Because in one incident, the Pharaoh actually said, ما أريكم إلا ما أرى. I'm just here guiding you. وما أهديكم إلا سبيل الرشاد. I'm just trying to bring you سبيل الرشاد. I'm just trying to guide you to the right, to the right lifestyle and to the right path. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responding. وَمَا هَدَى. He actually deluded the people and did not actually guide them. And that is more of a tahakkum. It is more being sarcastic on what Fir'aun was claiming earlier, that he was telling them that I'm just here guiding you. And this is really important to mention, that always those that will bring delusion will always convince you, will always find manipulative ways in order to tell you that that is human rights, that is economy, that is prosperity, that is civilization. Remember when he actually said طريقتكم المثلى, that this is your civilization, that this is the best way in how we can live. And this is really important to mention, because many are deluded with liberalism today and think that this is finally what man has reached. This is no different. This is no different than the Nazis and the fascism and the Fir'aun and all those different isms that had previously lived before even the time of liberalism today. Liberalism is not any different. It is exactly the same type of delusion that Fir'aun had previously practiced, in where he was telling them, see, look, we built a civilization with this type of tariqah, with this type of lifestyle. We built in prosperity, we brought in good economy, we brought in a good lifestyle, and this is bringing in the freedom, this is bringing in the civilization. This is exactly what Fir'aun was promoting. This is exactly what Fir'aun was doing, and this is also what the other nations were also saying. Same thing with Qawm Lut. They were also Qawm Lut, where they were practicing that homosexuality. They were saying, well, expel Lut because he is right here spreading profanity by spreading purity. What? Purification was seen at that moment. The reason why they said, well, أخرجوه من قريتكم, get him, expel him out of the city. Why? That because he was actually spreading an evil thing. What is that evil thing? Purification. He was spreading purification. That's exactly how they started seeing the evil thing as a good thing. Purity became disgusting. Purity became disgusting, and then given it different labels. It's so easy. Now, when you say heterosexual, it's like it's a different type, it's a different style, it's just a different taste. And then homosexual, it's a different taste. So just like I want you to respect my heterosexual, you got to respect my homosexual. And without us realizing, it's just giving it a different way of giving that misguidance, a different type of manipulation, but just so that it would seem like it was just a different way. Because assuming that everything is relative, that everything is just a different lifestyle. That's why they said, أخرجوهم. Why? They're people seeking purification. What a disgusting thing to do. And here, same thing. During our time, we're being told that, any other practice other than what liberalism calls for today is considered somehow disrespect and it not being tolerant of others' desires and others' choices, and that it is somehow forcing others to practice your lifestyle, even though isn't that what liberalism is also practicing, in where it's forcing you to accept one certain lifestyle, which is the lifestyle that they think should be the practice. وَمَا هَدَى was not guided. Here, the story tells us how history repeats itself, how da'wah repeats itself, how misguidance practices the same type of manipulation. Misguidance practices the same type of manipulation, in where it is always to convince you that it has reached the same thing. It is always to convince you that سبيل الرشاد, as in Surah Ghafir, قال فرعون ما أريكم إلا ما أرى وما أهديكم إلا سبيل الرشاد. I'm just here to guide you. I'm just here to lead you to prosperity on economical, social, psychological, and the civilization and all those different ends. This is just to bring you that. And يا بني إسرائيل قد أنجيناكم, O people, children of Israel, قد أنجيناكم من عدوكم. In another قراءة قد أنجيتكم, قد أنجيناكم من عدوكم. We had saved you from your enemy. وواعدناكم. In another قراءة وواعدتكم جانب الطور الأيمن, on the right side. جانب الطور الأيمن, on the right side. There was a promise. That promise, وواعدتكم or وواعدناكم, two قراءات. جانب الطور الأيمن, there was an appointment that they would go, and Prophet Musa alayhi salam would meet the Lord Almighty. The Lord Almighty on the right side of the mountain. وَنَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَنَّ وَالسَّلْوَى. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they were now fleeing for the sake of their Lord Almighty, and now they had no food and no water and no source of maintaining their life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent down man and salwa. Man and salwa are two different fruits of Jannah. كُلُوا مِن طَيِّبَاتِ مَا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ. Now I want to note here is that the side وَعَدْنَاكُمْ جَانِبَ الطُّورِ الْأَيْمَنِ, that's different than what was mentioned in Surah Al-Qasas. فَلَمَّا آتَاهَا نُودِيَ مِنْ شَاطِئِ الْوَادِ الْأَيْمَنِ فِي الْبُقْعَةِ الْمُبَارَكَةِ. Because in another event, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا كُنْتَ بِجَانِبِ الْغَرْبِيِّ إِذْ قَضَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى. So there's, in one incident, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that he was speaking to Prophet Musa in Janib al-Tur al-Ayman, so it was more on the right side. More, if it's on the right side, meaning that it was towards the Qibla, because if we're in Egypt, it's going to be towards the Qibla. And in another time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا كُنْتَ بِجَانِبِ الْغَرْبِيِّ, that you were not on the west side, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala إِذْ قَضَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى الْأَمْرِ, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent him another revelation. So these are two different incidents. All right. وَنَزَّلْنَا كُلُوا مِن طَيِّبَاتِ مَا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ وَلَا تَطْغَوْا فِيهِ. Very important things to mention here. كُلُوا مِن طَيِّبَاتِ, and eat from طَيِّبَاتِ مَا رَزَقْتُكُمْ in another قراءة, and رَزَقْنَاكُمْ in the majority, in the قراءة of the majority. Eat from طَيِّبَات. The word طَيِّبَات would mean from the pure things, from the good things. So not everything that you see around you that you necessarily have the permission to eat it. مَا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ, with what we had cherished you with. وَلَا تَطْغَوْا فِيهِ. Now, وَلَا تَطْغَوْا فِيهِ, meaning why فيه and why لا تطغوا. كُلُوا مِن طَيِّبَات, because generally First of all, you see that it talked about food here. Again, food is always present in the Quran. Eating, and the issue of eating is always present in the Quran because when we see food itself actually has a very direct relationship with what and how you do that tazkiyah. Eating and drinking has a direct relationship with your own tazkiyah, and with your tazkiyah relates to your spirituality. So here, وَلَا تَطْغَوْا فِيهِ, notice when we said that tazkiyah includes two things, the substance itself and the amount. All right? So the substance itself is actually tayyib, is actually halal. لا تطغوا فيه, meaning do not exceed the amount that is tayyib. The amount that is tayyib. So what this is really important to mention, because when we look at, remember, let's do it again. We said tazkiyah, it relates to what you eat and what you drink and the reproduction and etc. In other words, what you insert in your body, and what you insert in your body affects your spirituality. It all goes back. If you want to work on your spirituality, one way of working on it is by looking at what you're inserting in it. The different things that you can insert in your body can include what you insert in your body in terms of your mind, your mouth, your private part, your eyes and what they are seeing. All that acts as a substance that you're inserting inside your body. So when we look at that, what you insert is really going to be what yarshah. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, yarshah means what is ejecting from your body. What ejects from your body is really the behavior. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ actually said that if the person is in a state of tama'nina, if they are of tranquility, if they're in a state of tazkiyah, in a state of khushu', that's when their jawarih, that's when their extremities, their behavior, if the heart, which is what you inserted in, the box is the heart, and what you insert in the heart is going to appear on al-jawarih, on your extremities, on your behavior. It really began with, what did you insert? What did you put inside? Well, not only the substance itself, but you want to make sure that the substance itself does not exceed the limited amount. Because the amount, even if it is good, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, لا تطغوا فيه. Don't exceed, even if it is halal. Exceeding the amount can actually result in it affecting you negatively. فَيَحِلَّ عَلَيْكُمْ غَضَبِي. In another qira'ah, فَيَحُلَّ عَلَيْكُمْ غَضَبِي, meaning that if you exceed any of these two conditions, the tayyib, the halal items, and also the amount, then here's the fa again. فَيَحِلَّ عَلَيْكُمْ غَضَبِي. Then there's going to be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be angry. Angry, here ghadab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would smile, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be angry, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would love. So certain things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's anger would fill on those that transgress the amount and transgress the substance. And even when we look at that engagement, it will result in the person himself going into that excessive behavior where they will not control, and that would lead to sinning. Right? It would lead to sinning. You look at the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ actually told the Sahaba, he told the Sahaba one very important part, which is that if you fear that you are not, يا معشر الشباب من استطاع منكم الباءة فليتزوج, telling the young men, the youth, that if you're able to get married, then do so. If you're not capable of doing so, then فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ, then let them engage in fasting. Why? Because engaging in fasting is going to help you control the spirituality and control your behavior. Remember when we talked about tazkiyah? So here we go. The whole behavior, when it went wrong, that is what really resulted in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being angry, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being not content and discontent over the action. So this is going in, not necessarily that if you go into, let's say, the person went and took the amount being more than what it was considered as permissible, but this is saying فَيَحِلَّ. So here we go, meaning that it may result, and this, by cause and effect, will actually later bring about another effect where it will lead to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being angry or not content over the person's actions. It all started out with what they ate and how they exceeded the limit, the amount that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had considered as lawful. وَمَن يَحْلِلْ عَلَيْهِ غَضَبِي فَقَدْ هَوَى. In another qira'ah, يَحْلُلْ. وَمَن يَحْلِلْ عَلَيْهِ غَضَبِي. And whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يَحْلِلْ عَلَيْهِ غَضَبِي. So when we say يَحْلِلْ عَلَيْهِ غَضَبِي, it is referring to time. That once the time, in other words, they exceeded the amount and they exceeded the substance, then in that situation, with time, يَحْلِلْ عَلَيْهِ غَضَبِي, with time, that will result in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being angry at them, and this will eventually result فَقَدْ هَوَى. Hawa is to fall from high places. So in the beginning, you may get into that infatuation and you will not realize with time what those two items are leading you in, but eventually you will see yourself dropping from high places. And this dropping here is a metaphor. It doesn't literally mean that you are going to drop, but this is a metaphor, meaning that the person had totally slipped in a major steep away from truth and away from tazkiyah, away from purification, and it all started out with what they were eating. Now, in another qira'ah, فَيَحُلَّ, or here يَحْلُلْ عَلَيْهِ غَضَبِي, this would be talking about place, meaning that the place itself that you have gotten into is going to be what is going to result into you falling from those high places, metaphorically speaking, and resulting in the position that will lead you into al-ghadab, that will lead you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not be content over that action. Now, this is a very important lesson for us to learn, because in the end, we usually get engaged, and there's a qira'ah, and this is really important to mention, that وَنَبْلُوَكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً, and that we would نَبْلُوَكُمْ, we would trial you, would test you, بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً, or وَالْخَيْرُ فِتْنَةً, and two different explanations, because we say نَبْلُوَكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً, that would mean that both khair and shar are both ibtila, they're both trials, they're both to test you. But if we would say نَبْلُوَكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ, نَبْلُوَكُمْ, that we're testing you with shar, but al-khayru fitna, that would be mubtada khabar, meaning that with the sentence is complete right there, al-khayru fitna, that good things, that the blessings, the cherishment can sometimes be a fitna. You would be manipulated in it and you would not realize that it was actually a test. So here, let us not think that if you have a lot of good bounties, do not think that this is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is content over it, because in the end is that you make it rizq, You may get risk. The risk could be a husband, can be children, can be money, can be homes, can be health, can be intelligence. All that can even be a character. Charisma is a character, etc. You can have that risk, but it does not necessarily mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is content with it, because it could be a test. وَإِنِّي لَغَفَّارٌ لِمَنْ تَابَ وَآمَنَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا ثُمَّ اهْتَدَى. Next week, inshallah, we'll continue this ayah. وَإِنِّي لَغَفَّارٌ لِمَنْ تَابَ وَآمَنَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا ثُمَّ اهْتَدَى. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most forgiving for those that do tawbah. Tawbah, repentance. And what? Let's count them. In order to get this level, the level where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would shower you with his forgiveness, you need to do a number of items. Number one, repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Two, believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Three, implement the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent. Four, ثُمَّ اهْتَدَى, stay steadfast on that path. Because in any minute you could fall. On any minute things can change. So you need 4 different items in order to be showered with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, Ghaffar, the most forgiving. You need to repent, believe, do the right things, and stay steadfast, and not get off the track. Jazakumullah khairan, everybody. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If there are any questions or anybody would like to share anything, I'll be happy to unmute you, and you could share what we're doing the tafsir in, inshallah. I guess no one wants to say anything. So we'll see you all next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.